I'm the Director for Professional Training in Canada, and I'm also a veteran RDI parent. I started my journey in RDI way back in 2003 when my children were 4 and 7. And so I've had the good fortune of being able to see the impact of RDI personally. And I'm thrilled to be here with you today to share more about what I've learned along the way. And the topic that I'm going to be covering is RDI and schools. And I'm starting off with the very basic foundation, which is the importance of developing the emotional connection at school. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get started. So just give me a second here. Okay. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart. I love consulting with schools. I love supporting schools and the family relationship. I find that being able to go into the student's school to observe how they're doing has been very beneficial to my work with the families at home. I often use that opportunity to see how well the goals that we're working on at home are integrating into a more dynamic environment. I also use that opportunity to um, to determine any goals that we may need to work on at home in order to support the student's ability to function at school. And so I look at it as a very collaborative process of growth and learning and collaboration. And so this is a very important element is developing that emotional connection, that feeling of safety at school. And it's often overlooked, in fact. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about that today, in that schools have put the cart before the horse. This is what Tyrone Howard says of UCLA. He says that schools have put the cart before the horse and that academics have become before relationships. But we know that emotional connection builds trust and safety, which provides the space for learning. And when students are connected to their guides, whether it's their parents or their teachers, they're more motivated to learn from others when they have that emotional connection. And with that, then they also, when they have that feeling of safety and trust in their guides, they have more willingness, more resiliency, more motivation to actually take risks that are associated with learning. Throughout my work, I've also benefited from the wonderful opportunities to learn from others. And so I'm going to share a video with you of an educational assistant who was working with a student of mine I had worked with for quite a few years. She had just switched schools. Typically, I wouldn't go in to observe a student in the school until after the teacher and the students have had a chance to get to know one another and they've settled into the classroom routines and things have kind of, normalized a bit more. So typically it would be sometime in October. In this case, because this client of mine had come from a very stressful prior school situation, and I'd have to share with you that it's the only school in my 21 years of being an RDI consultant that I wasn't allowed to go in and observe, and it wasn't anything personal. It was just that particular school board's rules. And so thankfully, the teacher of this student would consult with me every month. We had routine calls once a month on Fridays to talk about strategies and to help troubleshoot some things that were going on. But without me being able to go and observe, it was hard to put my finger on what was exactly the problem. She was in, I believe, second grade, third grade at that time. And I had worked with her since she was 3.5. So the fact that she was establishing, or she had started to develop self-injurious behaviors and aggressive behaviors towards others and severe meltdowns was very uncharacteristic of her. But nonetheless, what was really very impressive was that all of those meetings that I had with the teacher were then relayed by that teacher, all of the different strategies and supports that I had suggested to her throughout the year. When we had that transition meeting from one school to the new school, from the old school to the new school, that teacher led the meeting and shared those strategies and supports. So I very much appreciate the fact that she was taking it seriously and she was trying to do whatever she could do to help to support the student. And so as I approached this new school and this situation, I was really delighted, and it was a big learning lesson for me to see. This was earlier in the school year. In this case, I decided to get into the new school year sooner rather than later. So school had only been in session for a couple of weeks, excuse me, when I was able to go in and observe. And so in the morning, it was the separate school board, so Catholic school. And after the morning prayer, the educational assistant said to the student, "Okay, let's go take our break." And I thought, break? What's going on here? Because traditionally, I would say that schools wouldn't give children sensory breaks until after they've, become just completely dysregulated, or they've reached a threshold. They're unable to attend to anything. They're overwhelmed. But in this case, this educational assistant, started off the day with what I would call more of a productive, proactive break. And I was just delighted to see this. I asked the educational assistant later on, I said, what made you think to do that? And she said, "I've learned that when children are connected to me, they're more motivated to learn from me." And I thought, wow, that was music to my ears, because that made so much sense. And she also stated that she had found that the most difficult time for a child, the most difficult transition, was from home to school. So first thing in the morning. So she took this time to connect with her. We had already been working on coordinating actions for quite some time, and we had elaborated to the extent that the coordinations included lots of variations with very little pre-call or discussion, and they were more rapid and unpredictable. But what you'll see is how this girl is able to coordinate her actions really effortlessly with this EA.
You jumped out of the ball, yes. It happens sometimes when we bounce very high.
Without touching?
Without touching?
Without touching.
Let me try. You know, it's hard for me without touching. You're very good at without touching.
You bounce on the ball
But we're
without
going to wait
touching?
without touching to be on the carpet. Okay? Feet on the floor. Let's do a pattern. Another pattern. You do it and I follow you.
Right, sir. So,
I can't follow you.
Oh, okay, I'm going to try. Do I have it right?
Stop! Well, I did.
I got frozen. Ooh. My turn? Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Again.
I got mixed up in my count and that's
You
fine.
can do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Do it. She's encouraging her. You can do it. The little girl initiates beautifully, and the educational assistant gives her opportunity to experience her own agency and to create the initial pattern, and then they move into the opposite roles where now the EA is guiding a pattern, and it's just a beautiful collaboration. And we have to keep in mind that they've only known each other for less than 2 weeks at this point. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit so you get a better sense of all the different variations that they did.
Give me very good instruction.
Solve mathematics.
You say it louder, and you do it faster.
And we do it initiate.
You do it.
Oh, hold on. Get me. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I got all confused again. I cannot go so fast. It's difficult for me.
And I would have to say too that this was a very passive child initially, so we see that she's adding in lots of ideas of how to coordinate her actions.
Get on your belly. Are we getting?
Reading the other one. Talk about what it's
We tie into,
Three, two, one.
Yay!
And this is good deep pressure
Right? Can we put that
on her joints as well, which can be regulating. And the synchronicity of bouncing and moving together is also very regulating for the nervous system.
show any of those in,
I count up from 1 to 10. Katie or Mr. Free?
so,
10 seconds to do.
1.
They did this a few times. And then they went into the gym and they had a scooter and a hula hoop. And they would take turns pulling each other around. One person sitting on the scooter and holding the hula hoop and the other person pulling them, which was, again, really nice deep pressure for this little girl. And luckily the EA is not very big. She's just about the same size. And then they would reverse roles and one person would be the puller while the other one was the sitting on the scooter. But this was also really beautiful for me to see because it provided me with the opportunity to see that this little girl, that the work that we had done at home with the family had now translated it to school with an untrained guide, if you will. This woman was a naturally good guide. She got it. And some people do, they naturally have this wired in them. And but it was just so beautiful to see that she had really she was demonstrating mastery, in my opinion, of being able to coordinate actions with others. Okay. So the reason why emotional connection and relational trust matters so much is that there's been a lot of research. Actually, I could encourage you to research this topic, but there's been a lot of research around the emotional connection with students and teachers, and how that really helps students to have higher engagement, to have more motivation, better regulation, increased participation, increased academic accomplishments, and reduced behavioral problems. And then we're not just talking about the relationship between teacher and student, but also between parent and teacher, and how important that is, because it's really helpful that people come together. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? So when there's better relationship between home and school, then it's easier to align the expectations, to improve the consistency in support. There's more consistency, then we're going to see more student persistence, have more active parent involvement. I often really encourage the clients that I work with to try to build that relationship with the school staff and to convey a message that says, I'm here to help you. I want to support you and at your efforts at home, and this is what we're doing at home. we're doing the work at home as well. Because I feel like if parents, if teachers just bring their kids to school with this expectation, fix my kid, and they're not conveying that they're doing anything at home, I've just always found that people want to help others that are helping themselves in a sense. So this builds more of this collaborative spirit. And there's several ways that that can happen. But one of the things that and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but is to have a parent create an all about me document. And it helps to really personalize who the child is and to be able to convey that to the teachers in terms of what their strengths are, what their challenges are, how they cope with stress, what stresses them out, the things that they're good at, the things that they're working at. And I've had quite a few parents tell me that when they've given this document to teachers, some have been in awe and said, wow, in all my years of teaching, I've never had a parent take this initiative to give me this information about their child. And it also conveys this message: you must really care about your child. And so typically what we would do is in RDI, we would work on a lot of these developmental goals at home. And once the child has started to make sense of what the goal is, we're starting to see that the goal is starting to, the way that the child is functioning is they're starting to demonstrate that they understand what that goal is, whether it's something like social referencing or it's being able to recognize availability or being able to communicate more effectively. It could be anything. But once we're starting to work on some of these things at home, it's a natural, it's a good process to transfer it to the school. But I also always like to think about giving schools just one piece at a time, something that they can manage, because often staff they're overwhelmed. Sometimes they have more students with special needs in their classroom than the resources that they have. And so we want to also be aware of those situations, so that when we're inviting them to collaborate and to help support our children's growth and development, we want to give them bite-sized pieces of things that they can do. And so it's really important to do this. And then the parent and student relationship, of course, is very important too, because it begins at home. So it provides that sense of safety and belonging. And we'll see that it helps children to feel more connected and less stressed. And then and through development of the guiding relationship, children are able to engage in more challenges. They develop greater flexibility, greater resiliency, and greater motivation. And it's through that relationship, through the co-regulation, that children develop self-regulation. So during COVID, I had a student who had started working with me at a distance, and in my work was to helping guide the parent and how to implement the developmental goals that were going to support her child's growth. And we began in the spring of 2021. And he was in a kindergarten classroom at that time, and he had an educational assistant. And when he went back to school, so we had done work for probably about a good 6 to 7 months. And by the time the child had gone back to school in first grade, ironically, he had the same teacher again. She had shifted from kindergarten to first grade. And so that was a great fortune for us, because she also knew where he was and had seen how far he'd come. And when he'd returned in the fall, she said he was a completely different child. And we would meet. This teacher was really great too, because she would meet with the mother and myself over Zoom, and we collaborated together on the IEP goals. And we were able to take some of our goals from home and then transfer them to school and help her think about how to write her goals in a way that were going to be more customized to this student. A lot of times IEP goals are a canned list of things that would fit for an autistic child. And I've seen some really great IEPs, and I've seen some really poor IEPs where, in one particular case, the person that wrote the IEP had never even met the student, and the goals were not even relevant for them. So, so it's really, that's also very important in terms of the parent and teacher relationship, that there's a mutual consensus on what the goals are, and that parents should know that they have these days parents have to sign off on the IEPs, and they are invited to comment and give feedback on them. So I always like to review those IEPs with the families as well, to really consider what's most appropriate scaffolding and if there are really appropriate goals. Okay, so anyway, back to that student who, when the teacher had said he was a completely different student, by the end of that first grade year, when it was time to reevaluate his IEP and look at his IPRC, it was determined that he no longer needed support. So the work started at home, and that's really important. And teachers are counting on kids to come into school. Just in generally speaking, they're counting on kids coming to school and already having that growth-seeking motivation. But for kids with autism, and that could be a whole nother webinar later on, but for kids with autism, often they're looking at stability maintaining and not growth seeking, because when we're stepping into unknown areas for growth, that can feel scary or risky. And that's why that emotional relationship is so important, because it does provide that sense of safety and trust. Okay. So it's again, this is what I've just spoken to. It's the emotional bond with caregivers provides that safe space for exploration, learning, and challenges, and it becomes an extension into the classroom. So, wow. When students feel, it decreases their motivation, and they have this general sense of this matters, this relationship matters, and they want to engage in that relationship in a way that is far beyond just complying externally with rewards. And so when they have this relationship of safety and trust, and they're growing as a person, they want more of that. So I had a parent one time come to me for a session, and they said, it was maybe only the third session, and he was about a 10 or 11-year-old boy. So he was able to communicate his excitement in coming to see me. And the parent was shaking her head. She was really baffled. She said, my son loves you. Like, I don't get it. And we've done lots of therapy over the years, but he's never been as excited, to come for a session. And I said, let's be clear. Your son doesn't even know me. I'm sure he felt safe with me, but he doesn't even know me. But what he feels is how good he feels when he's with me, because I was able to provide him with these opportunities for growth in a safe way. So, and that felt good to him. He wanted more of that. Okay, so it provides this opportunity for kids to develop greater sense of their own agency, self-efficacy, to develop more confidence in their own abilities and their autonomy. And so when we can help to support that through that emotional support, it gives children a sense of, I can do this. I can try even if I fail. Okay, so my son had a teacher in 5th grade, and he used to ask too many questions all the time. And she was wonderful. She was really, really regulated, but she was also just no nonsense. She was really clear. I wouldn't even say she was especially warm, but she was just so calm and clear. And so he used to come up, and I think he was afraid to fail. And she would tell him, I don't care if you get it right or wrong. Just try. Try, and don't come back to my desk until you have tried. So that was a message that she sent to him over and over. Okay, so if a student feels emotionally unsafe or misunderstood, then their stress responses increase. But emotional connection helps to reduce those, which also then frees up the bandwidth for learning. When we're really overwhelmed, it hijacks our amygdala, and then we don't have the cognitive ability to really take on new learning. Okay, so it also helps to support this idea of resiliency and persistence. So when challenge or failure strikes, and it's going to, a supportive relationships helps the student bounce back and not get discouraged. And I also think it's really important to establish this idea of normalizing mistakes, and that mistakes are okay, and that mistakes are how we learn. These are two short videos that I often share with, sometimes I share them directly with my clients, with the students, depending on their language capacities and their cognitive understanding. And then other times I may share these videos with
Build a
more.
website you love
You don't want those ads, but I
with
guess
Wix.
we'll have to listen through it
For your
for a
words,
second. Get
You know, it's always a little bit frustrating to me when people have a negative relationship with failure. Failure is a massive part of being able to be successful. You have to get comfortable with failure. You have to actually seek failure. Failure is where all of the lessons are. You know, when you go to the gym and you work out, you're actually seeking failure. You want to take your muscles to the point where you get to failure, because that's where the adaptation is. That's where growth is. Successful people fail a lot. They fail a whole lot more than they succeed, but they extract the lessons from the failure, and they use that, the energy, and they use the wisdom to come around to the next phase of success. You gotta take a shot. You have to live at the edge of your capabilities. You gotta live where you're almost certain you're going to fail. That's the reason for practice. Practice is controlled failure. You're getting to your limit, getting to your limit, getting to your limit. You can't lift that. You can't do that. Until you get to the point that all of a sudden your body makes the adjustment, and then you can do it. Failure actually helps you to recognize the areas where you need to evolve. So fail early, fail often, fail forward.
fail forward. I also love that he said practice is controlled failure. So I think it's just so important to normalize this.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
Just remember the story of, I went into my son's first grade classroom, and he had this teacher that I'd seen I'd seen the year before at some kind of a school assembly, and I thought, oh wow, she's so energetic and I thought she was going to be really lovely. Well, anyway, when he started her classroom, and it was a grade 1-2 split, so he was going to be in her class for the next 2 years, she was complaining about everything to me. They couldn't remember where his pencil was. This was my son who was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5, and we've been doing RDI for about a year by then. But so she complained about so many things. So I finally said, well, let me come in and observe, because I need to see this. And when I did, she had there was 8 kids in the grade 1 class, and perhaps about the same in the grade 2 class. It was a smaller private school. But anyway, she had 4 kids in this one pod sitting in 4 desks all facing each other, and 4 kids over here in this pod. And I said, oh, can you tell me why you had decided to situate the children in the way that you did? And the teacher said to me, the teacher said to me, well, these students, my son was sitting over here in this pod group, and she said, these students are doing really well, and these students aren't. And I don't want to mix these students with the kids that are doing really well. So I thought, well, guess what, honey? These students that are doing really well are going to do really well no matter whether you're there or not. But if you're basing all of your, feelings of success and competence on the students that are doing really well, it might be really helpful for you to shift them to the kids that aren't. Anyway, long story short, I pulled him from that school because I thought I can't. There was many more things, but she would have been clearly the person that would have just focused more on getting it right and doing it well versus the one that could look at these opportunities to learn from. And Will Smith in his webinar or in his little video there, he talked about wisdom. And wisdom is actually what we develop as humans through our the personal knowledge that we achieve through our experiences. And often those experiences are, well, that didn't work, but I learned from it, and maybe I'll try it this way the next time. So that is just a really important kind of core aspect of RDI and learning from our experiences and making learning meaningful. So we're also thinking about having this coherence and consistency across contexts. And so when parents, teachers, and students share aligned expectations, language, and emotional norms, there's less conflict, confusion, and more harmony. And now that's not always going to be possible in that the parent mindset and style is going to necessarily align with the teachers. There was a time when I had to write a goal for a child once called "Sometimes people yell or have bad days and it has nothing to do with me." And we had to look at some supports for him because he unfortunately had a teacher who was a real screamer, but he had to learn not to personalize that and to know that it didn't have anything to do with him. And we also got him some headphones. So obviously, his experience at school was vastly different than his experience at home. And so while we can't always ensure that the parents and the teachers are going to have the same style, it's important to try to communicate effectively and to support one another with positive mindsets and understanding about how we can best support students. And so I think that rituals can be so incredibly helpful for students to develop a sense of belonging and to feel connected. And so Dr. Renee Brown describes connection as energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. And rituals allow for those connections to take place. I'm always encouraging my clients, my parents, to think about perhaps favorite or fond childhood memories of rituals or traditions that they might have shared with their family members, their aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, siblings, some of those things that were unique to them and their relationships and became a way of thinking about that connection or that belonging. And I encourage it in the classroom as well. Dr. Linda Bloom describes rituals as actions that support the deepening of our emotional connections. And Rob Wuthnow says that rituals are any actions or events that have symbolic meaning. So more of that, that connection, that representation of community, of belonging, of relationship beyond what their instrumental value is. And then Dr. Becky Bailey, she writes the book I Love You Rituals and is the founder of Conscious Discipline. She says the school family is built on a healthy family model. So again, I'm going to go back to the fact that RDI needs to begin at home and to build up that capacity for the child to want to learn, for growth seeking, to want to learn from other people. And eventually they don't need an educated RDI guide. They can learn from anybody, like we saw in that video of Katie and the educational assistant. And so it's built on a healthy family model, and the goal of which is the optimal development of all members. And so the students aren't just growing in their development, but parents are often becoming much more mindfully aware. They're becoming competent, mentally agile guides. A lot of times here in Canada, if I go to a school and observe and I ask the teacher if they know Lev Vygotsky, who's a famous Russian psychologist who developed the concept of the zone of proximal development, they all know. They all studied him in their education. And in that way, I'm also creating this connection and this alignment, like, oh yeah, well, that's what our work's based on. And guess what? That's what you do too. When I went through my training with RDI 22 years ago, Dr. Gutstein was teaching the course. He's the founder of RDI, and he said, good teachers do this. So they are already learning how to help provide those areas of the optimal learning environments and the optimal level of challenge to help promote children's growth. It's just one concept of RDI, but it's a core concept, a core strategy. And so now I'm just going to talk about some potential intentional ways to implement to support that emotional connection. And it begins at home, as I've said. And but then beyond that, it can begin with each day with a ritual. And it can begin each day actually at home as well as at school. I had a ritual in my home that every morning we listened to Jack Johnson's Banana Pancakes and many of his other songs, because Jack Johnson's music is just calming and it's happy. And that's how we always started our day. And you probably have seen various things. I've seen videos of families driving to school together and they're belting out Bohemian Rhapsody on the way. So the other thing I'd already mentioned was an All About Me document. I will share my email address with you if anybody would like a template of this document, and or I have a sample example as well of an All About Me. Please feel free to reach out to me. I find that this is extremely beneficial to build the relationship and to convey more information. I have one parent whose daughter, it's a relatively new client, has started a new school, and due to work schedules and bus, as a transportation to get she's not even met the teacher yet. I believe she was doing it this week, but she was able to at least share this All About Me document, and is very eager to get to know the teacher and to start trying to collaborate with her. I also love the idea of being able to share pictures and or potential videos of what the child's capacity is, because so often schools or staff aren't fully aware of what the child is capable of. I remember it was probably 20 years ago, I was able to go into a school and have a team meeting with all of the staff at school, the special ed resource teacher, the board level ABA consultant, the principal, the EAs, the teacher. There must have been 12 of us sitting around the table. And we'd been doing RDI for about 7 or 8 months with this particular student. And he actually also happened to have the same teacher the year prior as he did this year. And we shared video of him engaging with his parent. And we chose an activity that could somewhat be replicated with some kind of craft that they could have done at school. And the teacher looked at the TV monitor and then looked back at the mom and I and said, "I've never seen that child." So it helped her see what was possible with the right kind of guiding and experiences. And so it's also helpful to communicate with the staff to see what type of communication system would be possible, would be something that these days in different school boards, they actually have apps that they communicate with. Other times they might prefer email. Sometimes they might want text. Sometimes they might want a written journal of sorts. And so when possible, though, I like to send pictures and statements about what the child's been doing, not just, oh, they didn't sleep well last night. But of course, that's very relevant information too. But we want to provide opportunity that can be then the basis for communication. So instead of the teacher saying, "Hi, so-and-so, what did you do this weekend?" or "How are you?" They can look at the binder, the journal, and say, "Oh, you went to the apple orchard." And learn to use more declarative communication, but making statements or comments that are going to be relevant to the child, and then providing that invitation, if you will, for the child to be able to share their, some thought or share an experience on that. And so again, that there's a lot of value in being able to share pictures as well as written information. Okay. And so once we've worked on some of these, once the family's worked on some goals at home, we want to transfer some of those goals to school. So my son, back to that teacher that said, I don't care if you get it right or wrong, I just want you to try. She was able to convey that to me. He was also a very inattentive kid who would space out for great lengths of time and required continual prompting to repair his attention. So one day, and he was mature enough to understand this, but I had a conversation with him where I said, we all lose our attention from time to time. And for instance, when I go to a workshop or a conference and I'm supposed to be paying attention every now and then, my mind will drift off and I'll start thinking about what I want to make for dinner or what I might want to do that weekend. And I said, nobody's elbowing me or kicking me under the table or, reminding me to pay attention. I said, I have to do that myself. I have the ability in my own mind to repair my attention. And so I'm going to help you with that. I said, we're going to practice you repairing your attention. And so while he was doing his homework at the kitchen table, I would be in the kitchen. And of course, I think that daydreaming is a wonderful pastime. Actually, I'm joking because I think that the world is just really overwhelming and far too fast paced for our kids today. But daydreaming is a wonderful time when kids can integrate and, some of their experience and they can reflect on them. And I think kids should be allowed to slow down. Right. So, but anyway, so I wasn't a drill sergeant by any means. I would allow him chance. It was the point is if you lose your attention, it's okay, but you can also learn that you can repair it. So with him, I just started to give him a little cue, and we talked about it. I said, I might just say, are you on or are you off? And I kind of chose to do this like almost like a light switch versus on or off, because I didn't want to even frame being inattentive as, a bad thing. Plus his prior therapy model, ABA, was, good job or bad job. And that really triggered him. So I certainly wasn't going to do that. So we did on or off. And then I transferred it after we worked at home for about 2-3 weeks. I told the teacher about it. And then she started to just cue him sometimes. And that would just help him go, oh yeah, where am I? Oh yeah, I got to repair my attention. So that's far more important than continually prompting, helping the child learn that they can do that themselves is way more effective in the long run. Yes, prompting them might be more efficient in the moment, but in the long run, it's not nearly as effective. So when I told the teacher about it, she was able to do that. And then I knew that we'd arrived because one day I was inattentive and my son asked me if I was on or off. I'm like, oh, yeah, you caught me. I was off. So, some of the other things that school staff can do is to intentionally build in that time for connection and check-ins. It depends on each child's abilities to communicate that. I was looking at some videos actually this morning from conscious discipline. Actually, ironically, it wasn't intentional. It just had come up, but the woman teacher was describing how she wears this apron that has different ways that kids can connect. And she always has one that involves no touch. It could just be a wave, but it's a ritual. And the rituals are really important to have some consistencies around them so that kids can start to anticipate that and predict it. And it can give that certainty for them. And so anyway, it would have different, it could be a handshake. It could be, I didn't pay so much attention to all the various ways, but they could make up different ways that they might connect in the morning. So other ways to help to support the state of that emotional relationship and that connection is just to see if the child is regulated before more demands are placed on them. I love this idea of using those sensory break times to enrich the emotional connection. And I strongly recommend to engage with the child during sensory breaks. I was in a school one time in Northern Ontario, and I watched some EAs in a school. I was there to observe the student in his gymnasium class, but they also had a theater stage. And that's where I guess they would take the kids to do their sensory breaks, which actually doesn't really make that much sense considering how loud gymnasiums can be when a gym class was in progress. But they had, I think, an egg chair and I don't know, maybe a mini trampoline, a few things. But while the EAs were talking, the kids were just kind of left to their own to just decompress, I guess. But I think what's far more effective would be to engage with the child during these sensory breaks versus tell them, give me 10 wall push-ups or, go sit in the swing. Not to say that those, that kids might not just need a little bit of downtime sometimes, but I think taking those opportunities to build an emotional relationship and that feeling of safety and trust is really important. And I like this idea too of proactive breaks rather than waiting for kids to reach their thresholds. So, some other ideas are to create systems that allow teachers and parents to co-set goals or strategies and possibly in partnership with the students. So in my case, with respect to the example that I gave you for my son's attention, he was actually in partnership with this and we were a team and it was really beautiful. So another thing that we can all do as parents and teachers is to reflect on our own emotional states because we can't expect kids to be regulated if we're not. And that we can also model our own self-regulation. So that doesn't mean that we're always going to be regulated, but rather it means that we can bring this to the surface and say, oh, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit frazzled right now. Too many, things going on. I think I just need to take a moment to take some deep breaths. Or, oops, that didn't work out the way it was supposed to, but I learned something. So it can just be this using out loud thinking or self-talk for parents and teachers to model self-regulation and also to normalize that making mistakes is okay. If you have any other ideas, I'd be happy to hear them. You can put them in the chat. So here's some rituals. So it can be, I'm sure you've probably have all seen these wonderful handshakes that some teachers have adopted with each one of their students, each one of them being different. And I think that's wonderful. I think even just the basic learning each student's name and greeting them by name, getting at their eye level, giving them a warm smile, doing that each and every morning consistently can be a lovely, simple ritual. Here's a little video of
Tiger try.
and I love that too because Tiger try. It was encouraging and it was something that they had created on, together. So another opportunity could be a morning reflection, one word for how you're feeling right now. This can be scaffolded for each and every child because some children may not be able to verbally state how they're feeling. It could be visuals. It could be for them to choose from, which could also help build their emotional intelligence as a foundation. Just recognizing emotions is the beginning of emotional intelligence. And so it could be if the child isn't necessarily verbal or able to articulate how they're feeling, it could be looking in the journal and saying, oh, you went to the apple orchard. It could just be some statement of connection. Okay. And it could also include end of the day reflection. So again, depending on the learner and their language abilities, it could be reflecting on one thing they learned today or one thing they're curious about or one thing that surprised them. Some others, I think show and tell is wonderful. It helps children to share a sense of who they are and something that might be unique and special to them and their own family. I really love the idea of perspective sharing. And that can happen in a variety of ways, even something as simple as as behavior management and helping kids line up for recess or whatever, but it could be, okay, everybody who has a birthday in March, go line up. Okay, kids that have hoodies on, go line up. If you are wearing red, go line up. But it provides us this space for kids to recognize that some kids, to compare and contrast at a very simple level, but there's other kids that are like me that also have red on, and there's kids that aren't. Oh, there's other kids that are born in the same month as me and other kids that aren't. If you like strawberry ice cream, go line up. If you like chocolate ice cream, go line up. It could be those kinds of things. I love the idea when teachers have roles for kids, because it helps them feel special and it helps give them something that they can participate in and join together as part of a community, as part of belonging. It gives them a special role. They get to experience more of their own agency and autonomy. So I love when teachers have those kinds of things. And if it's about, now, of course, that has to be shared across all students, and to be fair, but for a child with special needs, there could be an opportunity perhaps where that student may come into the classroom ahead of the other children when it's not as chaotic and they need to put their coat in their cubby and things away. But maybe the teacher will have a little small task for them that they can do that will help, that can be perhaps regulating. Maybe it's, let's staple these papers together. I'm going to put the two papers together and you get to staple. Or let's wipe down our blackboard together. I'll wipe and then you wipe. Or if it's a whiteboard, I'll spray and then you wipe. It could be anything like that. It could be putting workbooks on the tables or handouts or coloring pages, whatever it is. But that kind of could be a brief 2 or 3 minute engagement in the morning between child with challenges that needs the relationship with the teacher in order to feel safe. These things like that could be built in. I like this idea. There's a book called The Nurture Heart Approach, and basically what it recommends is that people become very attuned to whenever kids do anything that is kind or helpful. So if the teachers could catch and capture students doing some act of kindness. And it could be very simple. It could be opening a door. It could be picking up a pencil for a student that might have dropped it. It could be saying an encouraging word. It could be anything. But I think that when our minds go in that direction, it can help us shift from seeing, the negative versus focusing more on seeing the positive in all of us. And so that could be written down on a Post-it and maybe put into a jar, and maybe at the end of the week reflected on. I Love You Rituals. I already mentioned that book by Dr. Becky Bailey that's got a lot of wonderful ideas in it for classrooms and home. And as well, there's lots of videos on YouTube, video examples on YouTube. So it could be rituals, some sense, like this week we have a shared goal. Today we're going to practice trying, or we're going to practice being patient, or we're going to practice being kind. And again, building community and having that shared goal is also could be very, very helpful. Doing rituals such as mindful breathing, stretching, or it could be simply just slowing down to notice sounds in the room. Or it could be things like looking for things in the room for each color of the rainbow, finding something red, finding something green, yellow, blue, purple. That can be a very grounding kind of sensory experience that can help to reduce stress in the moment. I love chants. I find chanting is, there's actually, years and years ago, there's some research around how chanting helps to promote language. But I also like this because it felt very co-regulatory, and it has that synchronicity, and that can also help to reduce the stress on the nervous system. And so if the teacher calls hocus pocus, the kids then respond with everybody focus. And so here's just some quick little examples for attention, ready to roll, let's reach our goal. For perseverance, like, yeah, when it's tricky, we stick to it, we get sticky. So kids can start to learn that when the teachers say this, it can be a really great way to bring back children and help to organize them again and be in sync as a group. And I love the fail, first attempt in learning. So I love some of those. And yeah, I guess that's it for today. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if you'd like, you can text me. And I plan to do, let me stop my share. I plan to do more webinars. I wanted to start with this one as a foundation because I think it's so critically important to develop that relationship. And but I'm going to do more webinars on RDI in the school and how we help to support schools. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Okay, so thank you, Jessica. Yeah, thanks. It was simple, but it's just often overlooked. So important. And thank you for coming. Have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving if you're in Canada. Take care.